Um, to start off on a more personal note, I remember when I got, I think it started with an email. I'm not sure. All of a sudden, this person writes me and says she's writing a book and could we like something? And unfortunately, I didn't quite get that she was like contributed to the New York Times, and I was kind of like letting it in a little slow what was going on, and so I'm like, okay, and then all of a sudden it turned into a whole bunch of stuff. It's been a wonderful thing for me and to get to know Bonnie a little bit. Our guest today, best-selling author Bonnie Tsui, and I realized like 1 minute before we got on here that I had prepared for this conversation, but I didn't have an introduction exactly. So I'm going to read to let you know she's done some really cool things. Like I said, she's a best-selling author. Um, Bonnie is a long-term contributor to the New York Times and best-selling author of Why We Swim, which is another book that I've read. It's fascinating. That was editor's choice in the New York Times Review, in Time Magazine, and NPR's Best Book of the Year. It has been translated into 10 languages. She's also the author of American Chinatown and won the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature. In other words, to try to put it in simple terms, she does not suck as a writer. And you're going to actually find that to be the case as you read her books. She knows what she's doing, right? She's been, it goes on, but the important is she lives, swims, and surfs in the Bay Area. So on top of everything else, she's kind of super cool. And I can confirm this as I've met her, actually. She came and interviewed me and spent time with me, and really did a remarkable job at conveying our work, which I hope you read on. So Bonnie, with no further ado, let everyone know we're in the presence of someone that's got important things to say. Bonnie, welcome to Yoga Disability and Transformation and to our community. And thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I actually really liked your introduction of me as this person who wrote to me more than any of the other ones. That's really who I was. I was a
It was kind of, yeah, I'm just so, am I remembering right? It started with an email, right?
yeah, I did. I
Yeah. And I
wrote
was
to
like, okay,
you and
maybe this one,
Molly.
wait, this
Yeah.
one, something. So it was great. So without too much going on, because I'm prone to do that, I want to jump in. Um, and again, just so honored you're willing to spend time with our community.
Oh,
And the
thanks.
one thing that in spending time with you and reading your books, I've read two of them, your curiosity and your willingness to follow the stories along with the information is what makes both the books I've read. So that curiosity is not an easy thing. Your curiosity isn't a dry one. I think it's because you're a surfer. So,
I mean, that's what led me to you. I was so curious about your work and having listened to various interviews with you, and I just wanted to know, in the writing of this book, which I can't really still can't believe that I'm holding in my hand, but that, through our conversations and all of that time spent connecting, that it's still a real thing and that stories about you and your work are in this book is just really, that is a real pleasure and a joy for me to be able to talk to you about that today and to everyone here.
well,
So,
isn't that funny? In my introduction, I forgot to mention the book.
oh yeah, the
called-
book.
It's
This
called
big, this big.
Unmuscle, Unmuscle, the stuff that moves us and why it matters. Oh my God. See, there it is. That's the problem. Going off the cuff a little bit. So one of the questions I kind of want to dispense with without even asking you is what I imagine you get a lot, which is what drew you to the subject matter of muscle. And the reason why I want to dispense with it is on a personal level, the I think one of the overall narratives of the book beautifully begins in the third sentence, your personal relationship, and it unfolds over the entire book, right? And it's what I want to leave for the reader to get the pleasure of realizing the personal connection to muscle. So I'm trying
So
to tempt them into it. I
yes,
don't want you to say too much about it. But
I
go ahead.
mean, it all really starts, yeah, it all really starts with my dad. And my
No, I'm
dad,
asking you not to say this. I want to dispense with it, meaning I don't want to answer. I want them to read. Because,
oh, right, sorry.
right? Yeah. So, like, there's a beautiful sentence. The third sentence reveals a whole bunch that slowly the story in the background, because there's a great line about stories. You don't have an idea until you have two, right? About how stories go. And that's the story that's for the reader. So we're going to
That's
move past that. So I don't
all
mean to
right,
cut
right.
you off, but I don't want to have you answer that. But she already tipped you off.
I
But
tipped you off. It's
notice
personal.
the third sentence, and you'll see it's a beautifully understated line.
I
Okay,
just went
so
to the third sentence to check what I actually wrote.
yeah, yeah, there you go. Right. Um, so I want to start back a little bit. I want to like talk about the conception of muscle in general. And
Mhm.
you and I had talked about it even more in person than it is in the book, but I want to go back to how the Greeks actually saw muscle,
Right,
um,
right.
which I think is also fascinating. So as our conversations and the stuff in the book indicates, they saw it as muscle, and we're going to get into that more details about that, as an expression of our character, right? So say a
Yeah.
little more about that.
Yeah, so one of the things in this exploration of muscle that I wanted to trace back was where did our modern conception of muscle come from, right? Like why do we view the ideal body in this way? Like where did those ideas come from? So went back because it's always really fun to kind of, trace that, like follow the threads and see where they lead us. And so the ancient Greeks thought about, they understood before they even understood what muscle was, they saw an articulated body as something that like had meaning and had to do with like not just the physical self, the body, but like had to do with your character. So like if exercised a lot and had this very strong body with all these bulges and ripples, again, before they understood what muscle actually was, they would sculpt these Hercules figures with all these bulges and ripples in places where there weren't actually any muscles, which I found so hilarious because even when they didn't know what that was, they thought, okay, this appearance has to do with fitness and like also a control over yourself and a discipline and a practice, and that lent itself to whole personhood, right? So like that you had discipline over mind and body, and so those things were connected, and so you had to have rigor over your mind and your body, and so that was sort of that whole thing with the Greeks. But then another thing that I wanted to understand was like where this divergence happened with, like, say, Chinese medicine, right? So in Chinese medicine, in the ancient Chinese doctors didn't even have a word, a character for muscle. They did not distinguish it from flesh overall. And in fact, the Greeks didn't either for a long time until a certain point in which that there was this divergence in like medicine. And if you look at the old, atlases of the body in Chinese medicine, it's all about acupuncture, and it's about the body being depicted as not that like bulgy, ripply body of Hercules, but it's like a yogi with a full belly, right? And that was a fit, healthy body because that body was full of chi. It was full of life, breath, and this energy flow. And all of the sort of diagrams of the body were about encouraging a strong, healthy body through the appropriate flow of chi through the body. So I wanted to kind of go back there because it's so interesting to say, like, this is where it went like this, and how our understanding of what is healthy and what's strong, how that
Right.
kind of trickled down to us today.
Yeah, what's curious, just to kind of reflect it back in slightly different words. I mean, in a way, it sounds like Chinese medicine went more towards the energy flow and the way that animation moves through the body in a subtle level, and Western went more through the control towards the control and appearance,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Which is
Yeah.
like, duh. I mean, when you start thinking about that, you're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it's also funny to point out. I mean, I sit there and try to imagine they didn't really know what muscle was,
Mhm.
right? And think, I mean, I like pointing out about how amazingly unaware for the longest time human beings are, even of their own manifestation. So I know they must have had cuts before that. They saw exposed muscle.
Right.
Ever thought to really think about it, right? And then when the mind starts thinking about it more in the West rather than as energy, they think about it as what you can control and not control.
Yes.
And we
As
start to,
organs of the will,
yeah,
right?
right. So that's one of the things that I want to kind of jump forward. So I just think that's fascinating, and that our understanding of muscle is something that evolves over time, and then old themes keep passing, keep being reinvented. One of the things that, like, so as an organ of the will is what the say in the West. Later on in the book, there's someone you're quoting. I couldn't find the name of the quote saying that. Um, Gotta find my line here that the minds exist only to move the body, right? Which again, think about that for a second, like that then there's that thing about what the mind can control in moving, but I want to back off of that. So in a way, you see the thread, energetic thread between the Western conception being organ of the will, and then it has to look a certain kind of beautiful based on ignorance. I don't even know what muscles are there, right?
Right.
But they're involved in one, right? And so, but one of the things that I think is really important to point out to kind of be inclusive for this whole audience is obviously the mind doesn't directly control all muscle.
Right.
Right. So
Exactly.
let's talk a little bit like in the realm. I don't know how many muscles there are totally in the body, like probably like 613. I think I
Around
remember.
600 something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we have direct access over some of them. So
Hmm.
already you have, when you think the mind is the organ of, or the muscles are organs of the will, that's already a conception of the body that doesn't include.
Right. It already blows that up
Right. Right.
right from
Exactly.
the get-go. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, so there are all sorts of muscles. Like obviously, nobody on this call is alive without muscle. I mean, I'm paralyzed from the chest down. So there's some big muscle groups I don't control. However, like talk us a little bit about goosebumps, for example.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, my
Yeah.
favorite. Really, among my favorite muscles are okay. So we all think about muscle in a particular way. If I always like to think about this, like if you asked 100 people on the street what you picture when you hear the word muscle, right? There are some stereotypical visuals of this. A certain kind of person, a certain kind of body is allowed to have muscle, or like a visible, like, uh, like a visible, like portrayal of muscle, right? A show of it, a display, right? And but the reality is that we all have muscle. Muscle is not all under our voluntary control, as we talked about there. So we talk about the skeletal muscles, um, but then there's smooth muscles, which are the involuntary muscles that control our breathing, our digestion, all these
Our
or
heart,
our
right?
heart. Yes, we
Right.
don't
Being a
think about we
muscle.
don't have to think about it to make our hearts beat. Um, and yes, exactly. And then our cardiac muscles. So, but the muscles you're talking about that control our goosebumps are among my favorites because they're the tiny, weird little muscle fibers that are at the end of our hair follicles. And to me, they are the muscles of fear, right? So, like, think about a porcupine with the spikes going up. Those are
Mhm.
hairs. So when they're scared, the spines go up. Temperature, right? So like if you're cold, the your hairs go up because all those muscles contract to keep you warm. And this is my favorite, is awe. So it's like if you feel intense emotion, if you are looking out over, over the edge of the Grand Canyon, or like watching a beautiful sunrise, or the ocean rolling in this majestic way, and you feel, and I do love to think about this because just thinking about something, an experience like this can make all the hairs stand up. And so that these muscles that control your goosebumps are existential ones. They have to do with your state of being. They're giving you information about how you're feeling and how you are in the world. And so those muscles are giving you information. It's your body talking to you in a way that maybe you didn't understand was powered by muscles. And I love that
Me
because
too.
that's one of those surprising things, where it isn't all under your control, and yet there's an awesomeness about what your body itself can tell you without your conscious thought.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously that's autonomic level, but I think it's also really important from my perspective to point out that what you have already in our conception of muscle, and we don't think about all the muscles we don't control, and that it actually is an existential indicator of how you're feeling. Muscles
Right.
are out your mind's control. That the mind tends to narrow the metaphysic of the universe based on what it can control. So
Yes.
and that's like a mind habit that even for those of us that are in the adaptive yoga community translates into that, oh, yoga must be about the poses you can do. So if
Mm-hmm.
you can't move your body, you can't do yoga, or you can only visualize yoga and keep it in your mind. Well, it turns out that that's not the case. That prana can move whatever concept you want to put to it, can move through the entire nervous system. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, when you really get a pose really well, everyone on the call will all of a sudden realize you almost get your hair follicles standing up on end,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're like, whoa, that is like a different universe. And that lights on a whole bunch of levels, not just in your mind. So
Mm-hmm.
again, this idea of narrowing it into what we can control. And I want to switch now to another theme I think is really important in your book early on, especially, but it's a really good thing. Obviously, one of the things you said to me that I have stuck with me since one of our first conversations was, I was interested in this book because muscle is ripe for metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
was one of your phrases to me. And it's like I've been thinking about that. How long has it been? A year or two. I think you came to visit in 2023, I think, in June of 2023. So, but it also has taken on culturally and socially a whole bunch of symbolic representative meaning. And one of the things you point out very well in the beginning of the book, I think, and I want you to talk a little bit about this, is how power, strength, importance, worthiness, the conception that's been by the mind when they're talking about stuff like that, and then when the Greeks are thinking about an expression of the will, they're not talking about the muscles that control hair follicles, right? They're
No.
actually talking about, but that the ways the meaning that's been overlaid on muscle has been very masculine and exclusionary to
Mm-hmm.
all bodies, and particularly to women. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and we talked about this, we flicked at this a little bit at the beginning of our call, but that when in in our society across human history too, like public demonstrations of strength, who is allowed to have muscle, who, for whom muscle is power of all kinds, not just physical power, it is also political and cultural and status and social, is skewed male, right? And so such to the point, um, such that women, if they demonstrate too much muscle, there is the phrase too muscular often comes up, and it's kind of like, well, what does that even mean? And I kept seeing this kind of pop up, and it kept rattling around in my head in a way that was disturbing disturbing in that I wanted to kind of like peel back the layers and understand what it actually means when we say that. And when we say that is that we're disrupting this gender binary in society that has governed society for so long, right? Across many different cultures across time. And so when you have that, you then equate like, if men are strength, then women are weakness, or like if you're allowed to look like this, then women have to be a something else, right? And it sort of like has to do with gender roles as well. And so this binary does not allow a lot of room for expansiveness or inclusion because it's like what muscles are signifying a certain thing that is only had by a certain group, right? And so I think and know and hope that that changes, is changing, has changed, continues to change, moves in a direction that I think is more progressive and inclusive and expansive. However, as we all know, there's like always regression, there's always a push pull, and that's what that is like the nature of what we allow certain members of society to have and represent. And so, with muscle as something that has been historically very male, like I think at least okay, so in the just the bodily sense, um we have allowed men a greater range of body ideals and beauty and what's considered like acceptable or what's considered ideal, and women is a much narrower band of this is true. And while that concept of strength and who's allowed to be strong physically and otherwise is now something that is taken up by more people in society. I think that it's still something that is very much so like a masculine thing. And so in this writing of this book, I wanted to write about muscle and tell stories about people having to do with different qualities of muscle, strength, form, action, flexibility, endurance in ways that kind of blow up some of those stereotypes such that we understand that we all need to claim muscle as something that we can use to make ourselves stronger over our lifetime. And
Yeah.
that was my goal.
Well, I think, and I hope people in the car are getting the indication of just how wide a breadth and provocative Bonnie's take on the muscle from different angles is happening in the book. And that's one of the real pleasures of reading this book is that you move it from different, I mean, obviously with the strength thing, and you pick early on to follow a world record weightlifter and go in and out of that. And there are different ways you do this. You talk about jumping and talk about what that represents in terms of all its jumping is one of the basic things. One of the things that I want to shift to now, but the other thing I want to just highlight for later in the conversation is that it, we don't, without muscle, we are not alive. That's why it's so important that and we're not in control, our mind's not in control of whether we're alive or not, right? And
Hmm.
this is where, again, trying to get the mind in its place, which has
Hmm.
been culturally incredibly difficult for
Hmm.
the what Western mind to do. And that there is right now, my heart's moving, my my blood's moving, all
Hmm.
these things are occurring. I'm able to blink my eyes, I'm able to do all these things. Movement is a constant in everyone's life, whether or not parts of your body are able to move in all the ways. And that's just something that there's a later we're going to get back to. And when you came to the class online, some people on the call won't be surprised I referenced the Talking Heads and about losing your shape. But there's a wonderful line in another song, and I was listening to Talking Heads this morning getting ready for this interview, right? And it's a line, she moves to express the world, right?
Hmm.
That's why she moves. It's a beautiful line,
It's
right?
beautiful.
But literally, our movement, whether I can move my legs or not, I am expressing the universe. And every one of us on the call are moving to express the world and express existence. And that's why we really have to keep uncovering whether we're narrowing it down to putting too much emphasis on the band for males with muscle. We have to keep expanding
Hmm.
our conception of muscle, right?
Hmm.
So what I want to switch to, there's another big point where the metaphor, and the way you present it, and this is a theme that goes on throughout the book. I'm going to read um, from your introduction, which ends up reading your introduction after I finish the whole book. The whole book is wonderfully hinted at in the introduction, the way an introduction should. Again, really good writing, right? The way you build muscle is by breaking yourself down. Muscle fibers sustain damage through strain and stress, then repair themselves by activating special stem cells that fuse the fiber to increase size and mass. You get stronger by surviving each series of little breakdowns, allowing for regeneration, rejuvenation, and regrowth. Building up and breaking down. We exist in constant cycle. In fact, it is the cycle that allows us to exist. Now, in terms of metaphor, I mean, that's literally true. What I love is that when there's deep truth, they're true on every level, right? But that also has to do and applies to our community here and people that have gone through trauma, loss, and disability is that it's not that you, and hopefully you come back stronger, but like there's a constant loss and gain, a
Hmm.
constant breaking down and gain. And that actually introduces, and muscle is on the front side. It's even true for muscle. So talk a little bit about what you see as this cycle. I mean, you pointed to it,
Hmm.
but say you wrote it, say some more now.
I mean, it is so to your point, it is the tangible reality, right? Muscle only grows and can get stronger with use, challenge, stress, breaking down. Like you actually have to sustain these little tears in your muscle in order for it to come back stronger. I mean, that's like the cycle. And if you never stress it, it will atrophy. Like it will not do more. And I think, I mean, just existentially for life, this is something that has so much resonance for every day we're alive, and I think knowing that, and I do talk about that in various stages of the book, confronting difficult things, um, people facing challenges, understanding that in order to keep going, they've got to keep going. I mean, it's like a, it is the truth. Um, and, but there's something very empowering about that. There's something that is self-reliance, it's resilience. And when I think about muscle as a philosophy of life, I think about this quality. And when I say philosophy of life, it's these observations that, we're talking about muscle being more than itself, right? More than the tangible stuff. It is a language that we use to talk about ourselves. We talk about muscling through things. When it's a stretch, you're still trying. Um, you know, Going the distance, like enduring, like all of these things that we attribute to personhood, to qualities of character that we admire. It's very bodily contained. And even when you're telling someone to not be a person of action, to not be actively pursuing something, it's still a reference to the bodily state when you tell them to relax, let go, don't engage that. But it's
Mhm.
still, it's I think to, and also our emotional states are often very much like cast in physical form, like you're down at the mouth, or your shoulders are slumped. It's like these are our bodies are talking. And I love that
Totally.
that's
Yeah.
um thinking about also emotion as an action. it is an action because it's not just a manifestation of something that's inside. It's a way to communicate. Um, and so you are enacting the thing to show someone something to tell someone else something about yourself. And that is active. And so muscles are so much more than I think that we don't they're like the undersung, unsung heroes of our bodies,
For sure.
and we don't give them enough credit for how intelligent they are. You know, they have their own intelligence that I think that we should give them more credit and, you know, appreciation for.
Yeah, and also not just masculinize them or make them think bigger is better, or
Yeah.
to me, give me an intelligent muscle over a bulky muscle any day of the week,
Well,
right?
and then also one thing I do want to point out also is that muscles are doing things that we don't give them credit for, including the fact that they are not just the mo locomotion side of things, they're an endocrine tissue. They're constantly chatting. They're sending signaling molecules all around your body all the time, talking to different parts of your brain, and they're so essential for your cognitive health. Um, to keep your muscles strong is to keep your brain healthy. I mean, because these conversations are always happening, all these other systems in your body too. So it's not just about looking good or, like being a certain, it's not about the appearance, superficial level that often we're only dismissing muscle as. It is all of this stuff talking to other parts of our bodies in ways that keep us alive and thriving.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of the lines we say a lot of is like to live in your whole body is your birthright, right?
Mm,
And that, but I like it even better saying like, your body is also the nourishing thing for your brain. I mean,
yes.
you have to keep, and I like that there are all these conversations going on. One of the things I wanna shift a little bit to, but it's more like a further clarification. One of the things is that um one of the things that I think that a yoga practice does when we talk about the breaking down and the regrowth, that there's it's inexorable, they're linked, um is that one of the things that I think that a mind body practice does, a yoga practice does, and especially is something that you have to do in adaptive yoga, is you have to, instead of just thinking about your body in terms of what you can control, you have to allow in and start to practice the quiet or the ceasing, the different part of the nervous system that's more in touch with the hair follicles, that's more in touch, right? And that in that place where our autonomic nervous system is more on geared up or more present, that's a place where the mind doesn't get as much control. So it
Hmm.
tends to be a place that isn't as practiced, right? So when someone thinks about asana and saying it's about the poses that you can do, they're not thinking about all the levels of the whole being that isn't about how you can move, but it's a
Hmm.
merging of the two. It's like being able to include the ceasing part of the nervous system
Right. And one thing
into
that you and I
action.
talked about a lot in our time together and also in the book is interoception, right?
Mhm.
So all of these signals that our body is sending out within that is below the level of consciousness. So like again, proprioception and interoception, proprioception, the sense of your body in space. Oftentimes it's like external signals like your skin, your muscles, but also like when you're moving, like how you sense where you are. Interoception is something that more is about how your body feels, right? And so we all have a sense of that. We don't talk about it as much. Science is only really starting to unpack a lot of the um way, like understand the ways in which all these conversations are happening inside. But one thing that we talked about was like it wasn't with interoception, it was like it's everything from your temperature, um, pain, right? So like in your muscles, these receptors that are telling you when that they're called muscle spindles, and they tell you when you've stretched too far, but it's not like you're not in control of it. When the muscle fibers have reached that limit, they automatically will contract to protect against the tear. So these are things that we don't think about because we don't control them. Even depth of breath is interoception. There are receptors around your body, sensors kind of telling you, again, without your knowledge, without your control, how you're doing. And that knowledge is something I think we start to listen to more when we're quiet, when
Hmm.
we've given ourselves a practice like yoga to pay attention to those things. And that's what it's all about, right? To
Yeah.
understand this entire self and learn to listen to all those different signals.
Yeah, but I think part of it is to recognize that the idea that the mind's in charge of all these things, it's hard for the Western mind to let go of that. But the truth
Mhm.
is that the lot of the communication going on within our being and non-being is happening at a level below the mind.
Yes. Yeah.
And it requires the mind. So it's not becoming introspectively aware. Maybe the first step is to become more mindful, but in fact, the mind has to more dissolve and let all
Mind
the
less.
yeah, right. Needs to allow into from that's already happening. The brain's already receiving all the stuff,
Mhm.
right? The mind's
Right.
just not used to listening to it. So it's much more body to mind awareness than
Yeah.
mind to body awareness. So now I want to switch to you're writing this book on muscle, and you are a surfer and a swimmer, and as you'll learn in the book, right, that she just likes moving around and doing stuff. She's got
Can't stop.
lots of energy. Yeah, yeah. But then you said, well, I'm writing on muscle. I think I'm gonna reach out to this organization and this paraplegic yoga teacher. What were you hoping to gain from someone that from our community? Like by checking into the, I mean, because Angelique Lele is in here in this book too, by the way, for those of you that don't know,
True.
right? On page 131, I think it is. Yep. Angelique 140, right? So tell me,
I
like,
can.
I think I better write this. And by the way, everyone, she writes beautifully about what we do at Mind Body Solutions. So if nothing else, thanks for doing that. But what made you yeah.
I I think I listened to an interview that you did in which you were talking about um, understanding that your muscles are moving, you're using your muscles in service to the whole. And to me, I thought there was just like and you phrase things, you say things very beautifully. And all these things are like poetry to me, like phrases like that, or that we all exist on this continuum, right? Like actually, one of the things that I took from our conversations that really was like a central idea in the book to me that really brought everything together was the thing that you said about how our bodies, all of us, exist on this continuum from ability to disability. And we are all moving along it at every stage of our lives. And that disability can happen suddenly, as with like an injury or illness, or slowly, as with age, which is something, if we are lucky enough to age to a late, a late age in life, we will experience this. And it just was clarifying to understand that we're all in this together. Our bodies are on this continuum together, and to understand and give grace to every single stage of this body that we occupy through life. and to understand what are the ways in which we're changing, because we're all changing, always. And muscle is about change. Muscle is so adaptable. Muscle is one of the most adaptable, changeable tissues in the body. How do you use that? How is it possible to use that in ways as your body is changing to support like a whole and rich existence in the world? Like to me, that was, I think that just was something that I knew that spending time with you and talking to you, um, and understanding what it is that you do at Mind Body Solutions, and also like from your own experience over the course of your life, understanding like things that were told to you when you first had your accident about how what it is to live in a, you know, in a strong body when you are paralyzed. What are you told to do? What are you told to focus on? And like that you felt that there was something so essential about integrating every
Hmm.
part of your body, always to be in search of like this unity. And that to me was why I knew I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, and there are things like some of the phrasing we use that is like, muscular action when a yoga pose, regardless of your level of ability, it needs to go in service of a sense of direction
Hmm.
and also in service of the whole. I think everyone on the call has had the experience. Let's say you have a really tight trapezius muscle and someone comes and puts their elbow into it, and all of a sudden, but there's the relief at the muscle. That's why they're all in communication, but relief cascades through your whole body.
Hmm.
When you get a hug that squeezes more your upper body, or someone grounds your wrist and all of a sudden you feel it go to the other level, right? That's the level of the integration between the ceasing and the willful, the will, right? And so we've got all these different layers that are happening all the time in our experience. They're just not the ones like for me to receive, like if someone supports the back of your sternum, and you've had that experience too when you were here, and you don't control what you're receiving, it's not an action, but it does make you want to soften the inside of your mouth and inhale, right?
Uh-huh.
You want to go like, and learning how to receive at that level where the muscles then learn how to take that and move, right? Like how do you move in service to relief, for example?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a real hard one because we're used to confronting the world a little differently. So you reach out and um you come to a class that has um a Talking Heads quote, and it's lost my shape trying to act casual. Changing my shape might end up in the hospital, right? But the idea of shape struck you, right? Talk a little bit more about that and and what just say some more about that.
Well, I mean, shape is such a conjuring word for me, actually. Like I like we all try to hold a shape. And sometimes it's not as active, like you said. And I think when you were talking about relief, we think of muscle as this active thing, right? The thing that's kind of like aggressive, actually, right? Like where you're just like muscling through it is like a kind of like brute force, brute strength
Hmm.
movement. Like
And
it's about,
necessary to live sometimes, right? It's not a bad thing. Yeah.
yeah, right. But it has
Hmm.
its place, but also
Right.
so the relief and the relaxing also has its place, right? Like the
Hmm.
letting go, but also getting the assist from someone,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
that was something that I thought was super interesting. All of the poses that you and Molly were showing me about like um, how you can change, how you can achieve similar shapes, um, uh, with an assist, like
Right.
a shape that, even like, the inversions. you can invert, you can go upside down without ever going upside down. I mean, I thought that was very revelatory, like that, and
Right.
the Running Man and all that. And I just, to me, again, like understanding that have use the shape, reach the shape, create the shape in a way that is helpful to your body, can give you relief and release, um, in both active and passive ways, assisted ways, that are all like on a level of benefit that, yeah, it was enlightening to me to learn different ways of achieving the poses and the shapes.
So one of the ways that you beautifully tied the threads going through is that your father-in-law is living with ALS and you ended up taking some of this stuff and doing people on the call, some of you know, running man or running person, right? It was running man because that's what someone named it, one of our students. But and there's just a beautiful scene near the end of the book where you talk about, first of all, let's talk about he was a your father-in-law is was a and was previous a collegiate runner at Villanova, and his father, grandfather was a great
His father was a great
coach,
track
track
coach.
coach.
Jumbo Elliott winning as track coach in
Yeah.
school.
So running's really big for your father-in-law, and
Mhm.
you apply some of this stuff and talk a little bit about it. Then I want to ask you a follow-up question about that.
Yeah. So when you taught me, you and Molly showed me the Running Man, and just like again, this wonderful movement of helping someone who is seated in a chair to release the the energy in the hips and back, but also like it throws flows through the torso. Um, my father-in-law had ALS. Actually, he just passed. He just died
Oh
about a
my
month.
God, I forgot about that. I'm so sorry.
No, 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 no. But it is a memory that I really hold dear. I mean, it just happened, and
How long ago?
a month and a half.
Yeah, yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
It's
Brain,
okay.
brain fade. Yeah.
But it is a very, it is a cherished memory for me because, you said, it's something that this movement, and when Molly was showing me, I just remember thinking, oh, that feels really good. It feels, and it's like this, mimicking the movement of walking or running. And at that point in time, my father-in-law had been in a wheelchair for some time. And so I went to visit, we all went to visit him, and we were just sitting outside under the sycamore tree. And then I thought, oh, maybe, and you had said to me, maybe this is something that you can use or try to give your father-in-law some relief. And I thought, again, relief, because it's something that I knew that he was really needing. And so I asked him, I said, can I try something? Or like, and we practiced it. And my son Teddy, who is just like pictures for ears, eyes, for days, and he's just like, "What are you doing, Mama?" And I said, and I just remember thinking, I'm going for a walk with Grandpa." I just like having my feet planted. And this was something that you had the way you had talked about it, you and Molly had really helped me to understand, like, that I could use my body with my feet grounded on the earth to connect to his body and transfer some of that energy in a way that was familiar to him and also
And
could,
helped him feel continuity with his previous versions of self. Yeah.
yes, again, on this continuum, I could understand with my body, I could give that assist,
Mhm.
right? And he had always been a man of few words. But he was just like, I could tell that it felt good, and he told me so. And then the next day, in the kitchen, I asked him if he wanted to go for a walk with me again, and he said, absolutely. And we went for another walk right there in the kitchen. And it was just something that, it's a gift you can give someone. I think that in so
And
many,
receive, right? That's
and
the thing.
receive.
Yeah, yeah.
it was an exchange. And
Hmm.
something I really like, again, like I think with people who are, we talked about this, where you're afraid when someone is in physical pain and is in, unable to do some of the things that he was able to do before, and coping with that, you're afraid sometimes to ask or to touch or to um, because you feel helpless, right? And so I think what felt so great to me was that you gave me a tool with which to help and also feel that I got something from it because I was grateful for the chance to help, to
Yeah.
understand there was something that I could do.
One of the phrases I think you used in your book when you're describing this is you got to be the muscles because right when the muscles are failing, right, the bones get lonely, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
it is the case, right?
Mhm.
You don't think of it in terms of lonely, but they are. They're used to having push pull
Yeah,
on them other than just gravity. And so when you're pushing in, varying from knee to knee, it's not just that you're moving the femur bone articulated into the hip socket, you're actually getting pressure on the
yeah,
bone that is familiar to
yeah.
the
And the
body
stress, right?
memory.
The stress is and when I say stress, it's that tension that is built for, right?
Right.
So how do you get that? How do you give that? Yeah.
Like knocking on a door that the bones haven't had anyone knock at their door in that way, right?
I really love
Especially
that.
with rhythm, right? And what the other thing I really loved about how you described it was also that then you, because like, and I know this from being in a wheelchair, right? I'm not as able to be as connected with vibrant energy. One of the great phrases in your book is muscles of the vibrant energy or the vital engine of living, right? Because my muscles aren't able to be what connect my legs to the earth. But there's something amazing about the ceasing and the empty space that we all carry. So when you're grounded and pushing on his knees, you're acting not only as his muscles, but as his conduit to the earth,
Right.
which I can guarantee you when you live with a disability, it gets really lonely when you're more in a wheelchair. It gets really lonely not as being vibrantly connected to the earth.
Mhm.
Right? So all these things happen through the conduit of what is and is not, through the conduit of the part of the nervous system that control the hair follicles,
Right.
right? And the fact that you're pushing on the knees.
Yeah.
And that's
And
where
I
the
think
relief is coming
that
from.
that particular exercise was so interesting to me because um, it connects to the thing that you said to me about what uh, a good practice of yoga feels like, which was you said
Mhm.
it feels like the difference between a good hug and a bad hug.
Exactly.
And how when you and I'll explain, which is like, you're like a bad hug, you're just kind of like everyone knows it, right? But let's break it down, which is like you're like kind of awkward, it's not quite right, you don't feel connected, and a good hug is like integrative. You feel connected. And there is that grounding, like, and it's like a solidity. And when we were doing the Running Man, it was interesting to feel my body be the like solid connection to the earth
Hmm.
with his body, because you can feel that. It is that like it's it's the bones feeling in company, right? It's like the whole
Totally.
friendship. You have kinship, and
Hmm.
it feels right. Like it's almost like, and again, like I love talking to you always because I feel that every time we have a conversation, there's something that it like ding, I understand something a little bit better. It's clarifying to talk about, and it lights me up because it feels right, and you know when it's right, and
Isn't
I
that
think
funny? And all your muscles know it's right, not just the
yeah,
ones that you can flex, right? In
yeah,
fact, it's
yeah,
also
right.
like, wait, there's something, and that's what I love the awe that those muscles, the care that control the hair follicles are connected to awe. So in wrapping up, we want to go to some questions if there are. I don't know if there have been things coming in the chat. Um, is there, this is the horrible question I have to ask the author in wrapping up. Is there something you want to say to potential readers? I hope this at least everyone whets your appetite to read this book because it's got all these different ways in and out of a subject that we do take for granted, right? And it's because our minds want to be all about the control and not about the full receiving. But is what do you want to say in parting? Like not just why should they read the book, but what was it you're trying to convey or anything you want to say, however you want to say it. I don't even, it doesn't have to have a form.
I think that muscles are a conduit to joy because movement is joy.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like, it will look different for everyone because everyone
Hmm.
and has like a certain experience and memory of something. You know, like one of the things that we talked about that for you was like um, the feeling of, shooting a basketball and having that flow
Hmm.
through your body and know before it even leaves your hands that it's going in. And it's that feeling that I feel like we all are, whatever that looks like, we're all chasing that from when we're kids. And whatever that is, I feel like to understand that it's still there for us and we just have to kind of look for it and
Yeah,
find
and
it.
I think I couldn't agree more that it's, and I love the connection to joy. That's a purpose, great way to say it. If you think about, everything, it's coming from the center out, whether it be your nervous system, whether it be your vascular system, like everything. And if you think about, the impulses, the alive, the energy of animation going out through the body, and then we have this organ that can kind of think about that as it's happening, but it seeing the muscles as an expression of like the light or the joy expressing out into the world.
Yeah.
They are the conduit. They are, and we have to be moving. We are all moving, whether even if you're parts of you are moving. So, and it is joyful. I think that's exactly right. Are there any questions? Can someone, I haven't been
Yes,
looking
we
in the
got
chat.
we got one. Could you speak about the interaction between awareness and muscle? How bringing attention changes the object of attention. For example, we breathe without thinking about it, yet when we bring awareness to the breath without the intention to change it, our breath, or, pardon, yet when we bring awareness to breath without the intention to changing our breath pattern, it changes anyway.
Well, that's an easy one, Bonnie. Good luck with that one. What's the relationship between what I'm hearing is what's the relationship between awareness and muscular action, and how does awareness change muscular action? Yeah, I hand that one to you. That's a grenade of like, good luck with that.
Well, that's the thing. It's like when you look at something, yeah, it will always change because you're looking at it, even if
Hmm.
nothing is actually
Hmm.
different. And certainly I think in the body, I mean, I think about this oftentimes with that first class I took with you online where you're talking about the if we sit up. Oh no, like when your sit bones are like butter and you're slumping. And then if you sit up, then everything is aligned, that you feel more alert and awake and alive. And it's true. And it's like even just paying attention to it, I am that, right? And so
Hmm.
I think that's also attention is also about intentionality, though you are not intending to change it. It is true that when you do pay attention to it, there is an intentionality with yourself, like observing yourself, how your body is feeling that does change it. And I think that just is like a more of a waking upness to it that I think when you do pay attention to all these parts of your body that you don't pay attention to, that there's value and worth there because you understand all the attention that you never paid.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. We talk about that in the book. Like, um, yeah.
Yeah, there's also, I mean, like there's, and this is so hard to get across when your body's in a lot of chronic pain, but
Mhm.
um, if you can get the awareness to not just be through what's the pain of it, right? Awareness and having to being able to go through the body, whether it's even just your heartbeat, right?
Mhm.
Um, or your breath, it's hopeful. There's
Mm.
there's a level of it at its very core. Like my energy, even though whatever's hurting, whether I'm not well or not, it's expressing through my body. Like it's at that level, there's and becoming aware of that, right? And part of I think the goal of repetition and practice is to get it so your mind doesn't have to be involved as
Mm.
much, right?
Mhm.
So you're awake without judgment, right? So like, and so when the person writing, it's like you becoming awareness and movement. The goal is to get at the mental awareness in a relationship to movement isn't a judgmental kind of awareness or a willful kind of awareness, but a merging of awareness and action. So you feel the full voice of your muscles expressing in the world,
Uh,
right?
I thought of a word for that that is more neutral than the kind of attention thing, which is like that's presence, right? That's
Yeah.
being present because
Hmm.
there isn't a you don't have a cast either way. It's trying to get to a point where you can be present and notice things without having it be one way or another, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of what in yogic philosophy they're trying to talk about moving towards a more pure observer, right? Like where you're aware without judgment and you see everything that you are as an expression of what's happening, right?
Bearing witness, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, any other questions in there that you want to?
Can you speak to overengagement of muscle leading to weakness was one.
Hmm.
Over muscle leading to weakness. I'm not sure what that means.
So, if you're gripping too hard,
Mm,
right?
mhm,
Right? Like if you're work, I think this is what they're getting at, is that if you there are certain points where you have to let the muscles rest. If you're not letting them recover, for example, we
mm,
put it in a
mhm. Sure.
physiological sense,
Yeah.
you're having stress injuries too, right? I think
Yeah.
that's what maybe they're asking about.
I mean, for sure. I mean, yes. So I do think that when you are muscling it too much, which is like, again, like this kind of what we talked about earlier with like just trying to push as hard as you can through something, that isn't necessarily something that leads to strength, right? Because you can injure yourself. Um, uh, and sometimes like the best way forward is not just like straight through it,
Yeah.
right?
Your will is a tool, but should not be your only.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Good, good. Anyone else in there? Anyone else got a
There's a
I
few
got
more comments, but I don't know how much.
read a comment and we'll start practicing here in just a minute or two.
Okay, I'm just going with this. I am curious about how the eye muscles working together or not working together inform the body's sense of itself moving in space and time. So specifically about eye muscles.
Mm.
You know stuff like that? I think we're talking about oh boy, like again, there's one where that's I mean, I wonder if trying to help you here, Bonnie. Like I don't
Please.
even know. Yeah, yeah. Um, um, that I wonder if you're talking about EMDR, right? Um, um, that you know, the answer we don't know enough. I was going to make something up, and it's not enough. However, I do think that there are. I mean, I think you've got muscles in the eye that are also very much like the hair follicles. Those muscles are happening at a level that you're not exactly controlling. Your
Yeah.
pupils are dilating, not dilating. Um, um, all that stuff, right? So again, that's probably at a level that I don't know how to speak.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not sure that have can speak to that either, unfortunately.
So oh dang, I had something. Um, oh, so one final question before we practice about shape and
Mm.
muscles and how, remember, like I want to know, like, so here's another impossible question to an author, and I hate getting asked stuff like this. So I might as well pass it
Lay it
on.
on me.
Yeah. What would you like for readers to get out of your book on muscle? What moves us and why it matters?
I think a greater appreciation of muscle that is beyond our control, right? Everything that
Hmm.
it's doing that we don't know about. Again, these conversations that are happening that we can't hear. And that's something that I learned, in large part from our conversations. And that means that you're doing the work sometimes when you don't know that you're doing the work.
Hmm.
And again, like that is something to really appreciate and be. I think it's not that I want people to be doing something that's different from what they're already doing, because I think movement in whatever way that brings them joy and exercise of all kinds is wonderful. But I think
Hmm.
um, an appreciation for all that you're already doing that you don't know is is something that I want people to learn about themselves in this book.
Yeah, one of the other, right, about what we control and not control and appreciate everything. That's one of the big takeaways for me in the book. And the other thing was just how much, without even knowing it, I was projecting cultural things onto what muscles are. Like,
Yes.
right, in a way that's like I kind of knew,
Hmm.
and yet all the constructs around muscles
Yeah.
was really helpful to me to go, wait, and no,
Yeah.
I do move to joy, and you jump for joy, and like,
Yeah. And then understanding like where some of those ideas come from and how um I think even just an awareness of that you you can kind of it's not like predetermined. Like
right, exactly,
yeah,
yeah,
I think that's what you're getting at too. Yeah.
yeah, no, and you get to live into, there's a great line in there about that it's not when you're wearing down muscle or when it's growing or when you're growing, it's not annihilation, it's actually fulfillment. You're actually, they're made to express. All
Yeah.
right. So thanks so much for
That's
being on the call. We're going to spend the last 18 minutes or so in a whirlwind practice. So Bonnie, so grateful that you were able to show up with us and were willing to. And oh, by the way, everybody, this Saturday, and I think it's going to be in the chat. There's a book club on this book that even if you haven't read the book, you're willing to come in and even dig deeper into this book. It's this Saturday. So that link should be in the chat. So this idea of knowing your shape, right? If you think about when you're lying in bed and you're not moving and you're perfectly warm and you're all snuggled in there, it's almost impossible to know where your body is. So it turns out that muscle, whether it be you blink your eyes and you know where you are, like you can, and they're internal things that you can do. You can feel the blanket then all of a sudden become aware of the hub where the blanket's touching your skin, but you might have lost track of that, so you might have to move just a little bit to know where you are in space. That it turns out mind enters the body through reference. And our best reference, just like Bonnie's father-in-law, is action onto the bone. So sit up straight and tall. So already in this act, you're engaging things, right? And so even if you can't physically shift your position, Start to feel your sitting bones, right? And start at the base of the spine, start a pushing down and a very low lift in the abdomen up, right? And you're filling from inside to out. So as you hit down and lift up, and as you lift up, be more aware from the inner groin to the inner knee down to the inner heel. So, right? And don't just imagine it, feel it, right? Because remember, there are all these different muscles that you don't think you are getting feedback from because your mind isn't used to listening, that you are, right? So there are different places to engage. When I ask you to also lift out under the collarbones, that one's we kind of know how to do that with the front side of our body, but to broaden the space between the shoulder blades, right? As you broaden across your very low back, as you roll the inner upper thigh in and down, as you extend from the inner groin to the inner knee, you're activating muscle to fill out the emptiness or the silence that your nervous system's actually attuned to. And so are your smaller muscles that you're now trying to fill with some of your action and will. So what's wild about this is if you now extend out through the top of your head, and as you do, try to extend below your chair seat down to the floor, and you really start trying to keep filling and extending. There's a lot of ways. So these are all muscular actions. Good. And then release. The other thing that's really important to understand about finding your shape is, is that your muscles are help your mind know where your skin is. Right. So I've been trying to share this a lot in my classes, bring your hands together into prayer. And just starting to realize that if your mind is asked to move your skin, you don't get to use your will only, right? So if I ask you to flex your bicep, you kind of know how to do that, and your mind doesn't, goes right to the muscle, and you can feel your will as a feedback. When you bring the heel of your hands together, right, and you place your fingers tips together, or you do this on a table, or you do this on your lap, right? When you're given the instruction to move the skin in the palm, your mind, you furrow your brain, go, I don't even know how to do that. Except wait, if you do that as you lift your chest and broaden between the space between the shoulder blades, extend your spine. So there's an action here that's actually mirroring the expansion that we just went through. Now, as your mind's trying to engage all this, there's a good chance that it gripped the muscles in your jaw and you tense the inside of your mouth with other muscles, right? And so now, because you get to release, right, lips together, teeth slightly apart, do all these actions, but keep yourself also aware of the inward quiet. In this active emptiness, bring more awareness to the inhalation and exhalation. So now the emptiness is very different when your muscles are engaged, and then release and let everything drop and find the emptiness this way, right? And you can feel that dulling emptiness, right? And then that gravity starts to take over your sternum slumps. And this is also a fine pose, right? But you want, because remember, we're always like in a constant cycle of movement of creating and dissipating, and that's even reflected in the muscle. Come back into what we just did. Come all the way back, go slower so you start to appreciate all the ways that your muscles are firing, all the ways that they're active, right? The way your being is coming into attention through muscular movement. And then add more awareness of your breath. And hopefully you're noticing then even release. There's even in your inhalation. So we brought the body more into attention, right? As we start to activate muscles. And this is just the muscles that our mind gets to control, but they're actually touching. Remember, Bonnie talked about this communication that's happening on all these levels, right? all this is going on and being practiced in a yoga pose, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that you're trying to train your mind to be quiet enough to receive, right? So again, go from the dull, because the mind needs the contrast to learn, right? And then come into and as the alertness starts to happen, broaden into space, use your skin, broaden the skin between the shoulder blades, broaden the skin across the base of the heel, right? Engage, hit down with your sitting bones, lift your lower abdomen up. Make sure you don't stop it at the top of your head. Open to the space between the ears and the shoulders, open to what's behind you, and breathe. And then release for a second. On the very beginning of inhalation, there's a there's a very slight gripping. Gripping's not even a good word because it sounds too willful, but there's a locking down, a grounding that happens on the very low abdomen, on the bottom part of, quote, your diaphragm that begins the inhalation. So there's this locking down, this making there be an overt connection to retention to the ceasing is actually happening on these muscles that are beyond your normal awareness, right? Until you practice it, that's grounding the movement of the inhalation, right? So what we're going to want to do is go from the dull emptiness to including more muscle, right? Go through it again. Make sure as your mind's trying to be aware of so much, keep the inside of your mouth soft, connect the inner ears, right? Instead of just paying attention to how the inhalation comes through the nose or through the mouth, right? Try to be aware of how there's a slight grounding grip in your very low abdomen that just slightly precedes the expansion of your lungs. And repeat the inhalation. And on the exhalation, don't just collapse on exhalation, but keep that slight locking feeling even through exhalation. And notice when you keep that slight locking sensation, for lack of a better word, through exhalation, your spine actually extends, the energy in your spine. Good. And then release. So we're trying to engage in using the very small muscular movements around inhalation and exhalation to enhance the connection outward into space, right? I remember, well, before I tell that part of the story, I want you now that we're going to do, and we've done this many times. I mean, often I teach the same things over and over again, right? Because there's so much to learn from it. So come back from dullness into action, repose, so everything gets to be new again. This time, as you breathe, notice the like exhale from the back ribs, notice the lock, exhale more from the back ribs. Be more aware of the extension of energy out the top of your head, right? As you exhale from the back ribs, and that when you exhale that way, you feel a little bit more of the abdominal lock. And then you release again and get to begin again, just like muscles regenerate on the exhalation. Then you get to begin again on the inhalation. But the energy of the inhalation coming from the outside of you, for the energy from the world, is coming into your structure. And your diaphragm is being the intermediary between your bones, your spine, Muscle is being the intermediary between what's around you, the energy of what's around you, and your spine. And then exhale into more length into your spine. So remember, Bhikkhu Iyengar talks about the diaphragm as the intersection of the physiological world with the subtle world, right? And so again, you're through a muscle and grounding in the bone, through the lock, through the stillness, through the movement, an expansion of your presence, which includes what you can't feel and can't control, is actually coming in service of the whole, which is part of what Bonnie was talking about, muscular action in service of the whole. So again, sit up straight and tall. Feel the bones in your rear end, make them sharp, broaden, do all the stuff, right? Feel that slight lock. Inhale, expand into the space around you. Exhale, extend into it. As you exhale, notice there's an opportunity to lengthen your neck. Drop your shoulders. Make more empty space in your neck so you feel more. Repeat the cycle. You're exhaling from the back ribs, all the stuff. You're watching it go in every direction. What's remarkable about asana is that that level of awareness is also waiting for you as your body goes into different spaces, more expansive spaces. Take your legs wide, right? So now you're just like taking your legs wide here for a second, right? And you're trying to be in more space. You're changing your relationship to gravity, right? You know all this inward stuff that's happening. And the same thing is going to be true. All those little muscles and all the breath and the way your diaphragm is working, right, in relationship to your spine and to your ribs is all happening when you're in a different position. So now you've got a different relationship in your groin. You got all these things. The groin is opening, right? You lean forward on your sitting bone so you're not behind the balance point because you want to get the muscles receiving. So if I breathe back this way, if I lean back and go behind the center of gravity, my sitting bones get dull. My breath is going to be more forced to my upper body. I'm not going to get the base. If I go down a little, that's why you sit up in seated pranayama and you get that relationship where the bones are actually the gravity is showing you where your feet are, even when your legs are wide, right? And the same, and you start to broaden between the shoulder blades across the sacrum. Feel where your feet are. Now the diaphragm's more engaged now because it's more extending through the whole body. Now, can you feel that? It's harder to feel, but can you feel that on the beginning of inhalation? Fill the vessel. Extend into space, extend beyond your shoulders. The muscle movements being more focused, right? The little tiny muscles are allowing this to be even more connected to what's around you. And then release, and we're going to do it one more time. And we're going to take arms wide in a second. I had to check the time here, right? So now we've got all this extra stuff. Remember the diaphragm's relationship to your spine and to your inhalation and exhalation, and the lock that has to happen here, and how it relates to your bones. All these things are happening in every pose. So I'm taking a couple breaths here, trying to go through what we've done to this point. And then as I'm having my spine happen already, before my arms go wide, everything's already happening. And if you can take your arms wide, then take your arms wide. But now, as soon as I do that, I can feel my neck compress. I can feel a whole bunch of things go offline. So I have to repose, re-engage those little muscles, re-engage a sense of little to big. So I don't care if your arms are wide or not. It's little to big. The magic is in the little muscles, the little awarenesses, right? And then they express outwardly. Good. And then release. Bring your arms down. Come back. So the thing about, and then bring your legs together, we have all these different ways to feel shape, right? The thing of that, in my opinion, idealizing the outer shape of the muscles, like how it looks to the world, is to miss the work of the little muscles and the interoceptive part, like the fact that like it doesn't matter, if everything looks like the idealized Greek bust of David, let's say, with all the muscles, it's whether the inside is also happening and the muscles are happening. Like the inside things, the things that are already happening to keep me alive. Whether I can do this is not what keeps me alive, right? Whether what my mind controls is not what keeps me alive. What keeps me alive are the whole plethora of awareness and muscles that are continually moving. That if my mind can just not pour out of my eyes, if I can learn to go inward and outward simultaneously, just for a few minutes every day, and then take the best intersection of it between the diaphragm and the spine and the inhalation and the exhalation, I can suddenly bring muscles in service of the whole. And that's what we're practicing in asana. And that's what I think this community has done remarkably well. So just take a moment, and there's a lot of conversation that happened. There's a lot of things that happened. So the thing is, I have a hard time thinking, oh, I want to remember this, as Bonnie was saying some things. I'm just going to take a moment here and use quiet appreciation, using the little muscles to keep me a little bit more in line, right? So I'm not just, oh, what am I going to do? Oh, am I going to remember everything? No, I'm going to get into alignment, get a little bit more centered, lips together, teeth slightly apart. Feel my skin. Know that muscles show my shape. Muscles move my skin. My skin touches the outer world. My mind never does. It's my body. Muscles. We move muscles to describe the world, to live our existence. Motion is what keeps us alive. Stillness is what helps us appreciate being alive. Breath in, breath out. Remarkable. The experience, I love what Bonnie said at the end about movement being joyful. There's joy in any and every movement. You just have to find it. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thanks to Bonnie for joining our group. Thank Bonnie for writing that book. Thank Bonnie for I'm grateful to Bonnie for capturing our work as well as she did. Right? She really did a great job in writing about what we do. So everybody, until the next one, right, happens in a few months. Namaste. Spirit in me bows to the spirit in you.